Do you have a stack of raw cards sitting on your desk and you're not sure where to get them graded? Today on Data Dive, I'm showing you how I use market movers to decide which company to grade my cards with. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Data Dive. My name is Tyler Nethercott, better known as Teapot. This episode is brought to you by Market Movers. Market Movers has the largest database of fully vetted sports cards and Marvel cards available, now tracking close to 400,000 cards. Visit marketmoversapp.com to find out which plan might be right for you. And last week, I did my 249 card PSA submission recap. I got the cards back, I went through several of them, and this week, I want to keep the conversation about grading going. Grading cards can be one of the most profitable ways to buy and sell sports cards, but deciding where to send your cards isn't necessarily an easy decision. Grading is expensive, it can also take a long time, and not all grading companies are created equal. It seems like a new grading company actually pops up every month or so now. Some of them may just be trying to get their piece of the pie, others may have really noble intentions, but struggle to execute or to establish themselves as reputable and trustworthy. At the end of the day, it's your decision where you want to send your cards. You're free to send them wherever you like. But for the sake of this episode, I'll be focusing on what most people call the big three: PSA, BGS, and SGC. Now, when you're evaluating where to send your cards, there are really three important considerations, three things that you need to consider. The first one is cost, the cost of the raw card and the cost to grade the card. The second factor is gem rate. How often does the card gem with the specified company? This is one I don't hear talked about necessarily enough. And the third is graded value. As a gem and as a mint or one grade below gem, what do those cards sell for once they're actually graded on the secondary market? And as an important fourth consideration, a very important one actually, time. How long do you want to wait to get your cards back? So let's break down each of these three factors, and we'll also discuss the time consideration as part of that. The first factor is cost. So we've partnered with our friends at Got Baseball Cards to use their group submission program to send your cards off to the company of your choice. The benefit of sending your cards through GBC is that, one, they offer a free pre-screening of your cards to ensure that there are no visible issues with the cards. This is an optional add-on, but they're happy to do it to help you out if you want to do that. So this can be great if you don't have the time or the expertise to evaluate the cards yourself. They'll send it back to you, any of them that they don't recommend grading, free of charge. So that's a really nice service as well. The second benefit, many times their bulk submissions come back faster if you send them through their bulk group than if you send the cards yourself. The third benefit, they handle all the paperwork and you just need to fill out their simple spreadsheet. Fourth benefit, the cost to grade includes the return shipping when the cards come back. So that's something that you don't necessarily have to worry about. And in some cases, the fifth benefit can be that they get better group pricing than what you can get yourself individually. So if I go over to our website, sportscardinvestor.com/grading, I've clicked on the grading tab here. You can see all the options. We actually have submissions through PSA, SGC, BGS, and CSG if that's an option you want to consider. And you can scroll down and see the pricing for each of these cards based on what Got Baseball Cards can offer. So I'm going to use the pricing specifically from this page when I go through these different scenarios today. Now, the second factor that you need to consider is gem rate. There is a fantastic website called gemrate.com that aggregates the population report data across the big three companies, PSA, BGS, and SGC, to allow you to slice and dice the data in many ways for comparison's sake. Now, one of the great things to look at is the set breakdown. This will give you a sense of how many and how often different sets get a gem mint grade with each company. And for reference, gem mint is the equivalent of a PSA 10, SGC 10, or a BGS 9.5. It's worth noting that PSA 10 is actually the highest PSA grade, whereas SGC actually has an SGC 10 pristine, which is higher than their SGC 10 gem mint, and BGS actually has 2 levels higher than gem mint, being their 10 pristine and their 10 black label, which means it has all perfect 10 subgrades. So I'll reference all of this again when I get into my analysis. The great thing about gem rate is that you can actually quickly switch between companies to see how one grades, and you can see the gem rate for the entire set. I'll show you what I mean here. So I've gone to gemrate.com and I've gone up to population data and set breakdown, and it's a really easy site to use. You can see right here, you can click on the drop down, the sport, the year, and type in the set name. And if you run that, you can scroll down and you can see, okay, 37% gem rate for PSA cards from 2020 Prizm Basketball. I can see that there have been about 12,500 total cards graded. And if I scroll down, I can look at individual cards across this list. I can type in different filters, so there's a whole bunch of ways to slice and dice this, and if you want to get even more granular, you can export to CSV. But then the great feature here is if I go to Beckett and I hit submit, really quickly I can see that Beckett actually has a 40% gem rate on 2020 Prizm Basketball, but they've only graded 396 cards. And if I switch over to SGC, I can see that they're at only 29% for an SGC 10 gem mint with 16,660 cards graded. So big reason why BGS hasn't graded as many cards from this set is because like PSA, they were forced to close the majority of their submissions for quite a while. So I really like this website. You can also go in and see how many cards from a set have been graded by each company. What I mean by that is, if I come over here and I click on this little link, I can see the specific details of this card, which is really, really useful. I can scroll down and kind of see what that card's been doing over time. And there's also a way to view the set trend. So I can kind of click out and see what's been happening with the set trend as well. So like I said, GemRate, super useful site. I've used some of the data, pulled it from their website. It's easier than going to each of the individual companies' websites and pulling the data there. Really, really useful. Now, the third factor that we need to talk about is the graded value. We have to talk about value. It's no secret that PSA has the highest resale value of the three companies. And in recent years, that premium has actually increased, meaning the separation between a PSA 10 and the other companies has increased. But believe it or not, at one point, BGS 9.5 and a PSA 10 weren't that far apart. In many cases, they were 1-to-1. So today, it's not uncommon to see a PSA 10 sell for anywhere from 1.7 to 2 times what a BGS 9.5 goes for. Similarly, a PSA 10 sells for anywhere from 1.4 to 2x an SGC 10. So let me show you some really cool data from an important feature in Market Movers that helps evaluate that, and this is our intelligence reports. So what I've done here is I've gone over here to our intelligence reports and clicked on grade ratios, and I've run a report for PSA 10 to BGS 9.5 for 2020 Prizm Football. There's not a lot of cards selling from 2020 Prizm Football graded for BGS 9.5, but Joe Burrow does have some of the volume there, and you can see summarized data. I like to go to the last 14-day average or the last 7-day average. What that means is that the cards have ended, they've sold in that same time frame, so you're sort of comparing apples to apples. You tend to get the biggest data set in that 2-week window. And you can see the average around 2-to-1 and the median a little higher at 2.22, which can actually be somewhat of a better metric to use when you're trying to get these ratios. So somewhere between 2 and 2.2x a PSA 10 to the same card in a BGS 9.5 for 2020 Prizm Football. If I click over and go to 2019 Prizm Basketball, I can see that it's around 2x, same thing in the last 14 days. The median is a little bit lower, 1.74. So that's kind of where that range is. That's what it typically tends to be on ultra modern type cards. It's really important to note that these ratios are not hard and fast across sets, and especially not across eras. So sometimes I get people who message me and they're like, hey, what should a ratio be on this PSA 10 that's selling that's Pop 1 when a BGS 9.5 sold 2 months ago for this much money? And you can't quite get to that level. You can try to extrapolate, but you're much better trying to back into it with other analogous comps than you are trying to apply a strict multiplier, especially in a case where it's something like a Pop 1. So this is for data, a broader data set and something where you have a baseline to go off of. And I did the same thing for PSA 10 and SGC 10. PSA 10 to SGC 10 for the same Prizm Football set, 2.2x and around a 2 median multiplier. Much different scenario if I go to 2019 Prizm Basketball, and this is a bigger data set, I think a little bit more reliable. You can see it's only around 1.4x, same thing for the median at 1.41. So this is what I like to do to kind of get a macro view. If you just ripped a box of a product, or if you're buying lots, buying singles from a specific set, and you want to know how the multipliers stack up, using this intelligence reports grade ratio page is a really, really valuable tool. So These ratios, like I said, are not hard and fast, but they can be really, really useful. Another great way to evaluate the value of each card is in our popular card charts. So I'm going to go over to our popular card charts, and I've pulled up a specific card, and it's Joe Burrow's 2020 Prism Base rookie card. And I've run this report for all of these different grades. So what you're kind of considering when you're thinking about sending a card for grading is, what's the probability? If I've looked at the card and I think the card looks really clean, what's the probability that's actually going to gem, that it's going to get a PSA 10, a BGS 9.5, or an SGC 10? And then on the flip side of that is, I'm kind of making an assumption here that you've either done this before and know what you're looking for, or you've sent to a service like Got Baseball Cards and they've done a little bit of a pre-screening, that if you don't get the gem mint, then the flip probability of that percentage is that you're going to get a mint, one grade lower. So in this case, a BGS 9, a PSA 9, or an SGC 9.5. Certainly you could end up with grades lower, and if you send enough cards, you almost certainly will. It's just kind of how it goes. But that's sort of the assumption I'm making for this analysis. So I ran this report, and the reason I like this is that I can just scroll down and compare what all these prices are quickly for this particular card. So if I've got one of these or a stack of these sitting here, this makes looking at this data really, really easy. Now, another thing that I can do, if I just want to see the ratios amongst the gem mint cards, I can toggle these off here, and I'll just toggle off the lower grades, and I can come over to the ratios tab here as well to get a specific look at the ratio between these three cards. So I can see PSA 10 over to a BGS 9.5. For this specific card is about 1.6. A PSA 10 to an SGC 10 is 1.3. So in this case, the SGC 10s are more favorable, and the SGC 10 is running a higher ratio. Same thing here, you can kind of derive that as a 1.2 to 1 to the BGS 9.5. This is where the analysis kind of gets to the next level, and I think this is really important. I kind of put this into a display so that we can look at this, and I'll walk you through it. What I did here was I put, like I said, PSA 10 and 9, SGC 10 and SGC 9.5, BGS 9.5, and a BGS 9. The raw value roughly of this Joe Burrow card is around $75 right now. Here's the cost to grade that I pulled from our website based on those grading costs. $60 for PSA, $27 for SGC, and $65 for BGS. You might find slightly different pricing either direct through those websites or somewhere else with another group sub, but let's just use this for comparison. Gem rate, I pulled this from the Gem Rate website, specifically for this card, not necessarily for the set, but for this card. 49% PSA 10s, 34% SGC 10, 45% BGS 9.5. And then what I did was I stacked the graded value here in another column, $405 versus $115 for a PSA 9. $304 for an SGC 10, so lower ceiling obviously than the PSA 10, but $130 for an SGC 9.5, higher ceiling than for the PSA 9. I calculated the projected profit to have a view of what each of those would look like, and then this column here, which is the estimated average value, is basically a calculation where I said, let me take a different probability look here, and I'm going to apply a 49% probability to $405 and a 51% probability to $115. And then I'm going to average that out and see what that number comes to. This is basically a way of taking a look at, in a vacuum, what can I expect to get with like a probability factored into it. And especially if you had a set of these, like 10 of these cards, you might be looking at an average value when you get those 10 cards back of around $257 with $122 profit per card based on all of these other numbers. So this makes it really easy to compare apples to apples, when you're scrolling down to kind of make that decision. The estimated average value of SGC, $189 with a net of cost profit of $87 per card. $187 average value for BGS, but a higher expense and, as an aside, a longer wait time for BGS, bringing you to around a $47.30 net of cost profit. This is how I would stack these up. If you've got the time, and especially if you've got higher volume cards, higher dollar cards or whatever, take the time to do this analysis if you can. it's really going to, kind of pay off. It's going to give you a clear picture and expectation of what you're doing. And do this, I would say, before you're buying the raw cards so that you know what you're getting into. Let's take a look at another card for an example. And I've pulled up Mike Trout's 2011 Topps Update base card. I've run the same kind of comparison. I can scroll down. I pulled all these numbers and I can compare them and just basically plug them into the same formula. So if I come over here, same thing I've done again. And this time you can see much higher dollar card, much more valuable card than the Burrow base. $2,800 in a PSA 10 versus $1,100 in a PSA 9, and so on and so forth. And you can see in this case, the graded value of the SGC 10 much higher than the graded value of a BGS 9.5. So that corresponds to what I was saying with some of the volatility from one set to the next. So if we scroll down, estimated average value based on gem rate, and these graded values is $1,933 with a net of cost profit of $1,280 projected per card. And again, I think it's important to look at that as though you're sending in multiple cards. If you go to SGC, 1,472, BGS, 1,160, net of cost 852 versus 502. So the picture becomes really clear here, right? PSA is the clear-cut number one, but I would say that it actually, right now, the way the grading costs stand and the aftermarket resale stands, SGC is a much better option than BGS. You're going to get the cards back faster. They're turning around cards very quickly right now, and you're going to potentially have a better overall estimated profit. In spite of the fact that the gem rate is much lower for SGC, they kind of have the advantage of having the SGC 9.5, which tends to fare much better than a BGS 9 or even than a PSA 9. So it's kind of like hedging your bets and how much do you want to do that. So as a general rule, most people are in agreement that it makes sense to send higher end cards to PSA and lower end cards to SGC. I really wouldn't personally consider BGS right now. As we saw, they have the lowest projected graded value and the longest wait times, but I might kind of personally set my cutoff without taking the due diligence with each of these around $300 for a PSA 10, where the gem rate is around 50% with PSA. The math on that should check out to probably around $70 to $75 for the raw card, $60 to grade, 50% chance at a $90 to $100 PSA 9, and a 50% chance at a PSA 10 around $300. But there really is no hard and fast rule here. So the smartest thing you can do is to actually use the data that Market Movers provides to make a clear decision. So kind of wrapping this up, some outgoing thoughts here. Something really important that needs to be called out, and it's a philosophical question. Should a PSA 10 really command this kind of a premium? Is it about the card in the slab? Or is it about the slab itself? What are you actually paying for here? What we saw from the GemRate.com data is that the gem rate with SGC is significantly lower than it is with PSA across the board. Usually SGC is in the 30 to 40% gem rate range for ultra modern stuff, whereas PSA, comparing the same sets, is in the 50 to 60% range. Yet a PSA 10 is commanding a significant premium above the SGC 10. Why? I guess it's reputation, cult popularity, time in the market, although SGC's been around for quite a while too. Frankly, to me, it just doesn't make a lot of sense. One thing I know is that SGC is definitely rising. They have a long ways to go to catch PSA, but people are already talking about them having potentially passed BGS concretely as the number 2 grading company. They've won a lot of fans. Peter with their company is very transparent, and they're growing overall. Scotty B Cards, who has a YouTube channel and Instagram account, recently did a great video showing Instagram polling data that he did a year ago versus now about PSA, BGS, and SGC and perceptions. How do you feel about them? Would you ever buy their cards, etc.? SGC has definitely gained a lot of credibility since that time, including with Scotty himself. So if you're playing the long game on a card, you might be better off buying an SGC 10 at a significant discount, because if that gap closes between a PSA 10 and an SGC 10 over time, the SGC 10 might out-appreciate the PSA 10. Alternatively, if you're the gambling type, you could always consider cracking that SGC 10 and sending it off to PSA. That's a topic I'll have to save for discussing in a future strategy video. Thanks so much for watching today and taking the time to watch this video. I really sincerely appreciate all the kind words and comments that many of you leave week over week. Time is valuable and time is money, so I always hope that these videos help you a lot in that regard. Until next time, happy investing.